Good afternoon, June. Welcome to the next session in our afternoon. This is called, Does Digital Hold the Key to a Greener Future? I use the word digital because digitalisation seems a bit clunky, but it comes to the same thing. We're going to be hearing from Mark Locker, who runs a company called Attractions.io. They specialise in creating apps for zoos, resorts, and theme parks and other attractions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Mark, and I hope you enjoy the presentation.
Thank you very much, Charlie, and hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and indeed good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from today. We're going to get right into things, I think, and kick off by just going into a bit of an introduction of who you're going to be hearing from in this session. So first of all, my name is Mark Locker. As Charlie has mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Attractions.io, and our platform helps attraction operators to connect with their guests to enhance the experience through a branded guest-facing app. Now, I've been working in the attractions industry for 15 years, and I have a real passion for technology, and I'm very excited to be talking about the topics of digitization and a greener future today. And I'm going to be joined by my colleague, Jacob. Jacob, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jacob. I'm the Business Development Manager at Attractions.io. I have the pleasure in my role of working with attractions across the globe to create better guest experiences with technology. Really excited to be here today and talking about such an important issue.
Fantastic. And we're also very fortunate today to have two special guests with us from ZooTampa in Florida. So we have Sandra Torres and Steve Marsicano. Sandra, would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am the Senior Director of Communications and External Affairs here at the zoo.
Fantastic. And Steve?
Yep. My name is Steve Marsicano. I'm our Digital Marketing and Content Manager here at ZooTampa.
Excellent. Now, there's going to be a Q&A at the end of today's session. So please do send your questions in throughout, and we'll be picking some of those up to go through at the end. So today we're going to be discussing the use of technology in an effort to, help contribute to sustainability and helping our planet. And what we really want to do is explore how technology can help us to overcome some of the sustainability challenges that we face, and ultimately how we can use it to educate guests and introduce green practices at our attractions. But quickly before we get started, as it's Earth Day, Attractions.io are going to be donating £1 to Earth Day's Restore Our Earth campaign for each attendee to today's session. So thank you very much for being here and making that possible. Now, we're going to be splitting today's discussion into three key areas. The first is around the contribution that technology can make to reducing waste. We're then going to talk about how we can communicate our green initiatives to our visitors. And finally, we'll be looking a little bit into the future and how technology can help moving forwards. But before we get stuck in, I just wanted to quickly set the scene and talk a little bit about how Earth Day came to be. So the first Earth Day was kickstarted by the degrowth movement in 1970. And essentially more and more people were becoming concerned that excessive consumption would deplete our planet's resources. And of course, if you look back on that, they were very much right. And if we fast forward to 2021, we're all aware of the damage that fossil fuels cause, the problem of single-use plastics, and the impact of global warming. And of course, together we're learning to tread more lightly on the planet as a result. But while the pioneers of Earth Day were encouraging us to stop doing things in order to reduce our consumption, if you actually look what's happened, consumption is higher than ever. And that's where, technology advancements are vitally important, because if as humans we want to indulge in things like travel across the world, then technology is what enables to do so. It's what enables us to do so in a sustainable way. So we haven't remained confined to our towns, our villages, and our cities. We do travel, but we've evolved to have greener, sustainable transport methods. We haven't done without electricity, but we've created renewable energy sources. And we haven't stopped sharing documents or communicating with each other over distances, but computers and smartphone adoption has reduced the need to print and send letters and things like that. So don't get me wrong, all of those examples and those industries have their own issues. There's lots of a way to go for adoption in those areas, and greenwashing is a real thing. However, the point that I'm really trying to make is that technology does exist to dramatically improve the sustainability of many areas of our lives, and that technology also continues to be developed. So, for example, there are over 170 companies right now working on an electric plane technology for greener flights. Earlier this year, Elon Musk pledged $100 million into a fund looking at technology to capture carbon from our atmosphere and our oceans. And while you can go and buy an electric car today, you can purchase renewable energy or make your own, and you can go completely paperless in your organization, the onus, of course, is on us to make this happen, to get adoption of these technologies widespread and to communicate why these things are important. And bringing it back to our industry, there have been some fantastic sustainability initiatives emerging, some of which we've already heard about today. And I think it's important that we show this leadership together. So we've had Disney with investing in their own solar facility. We've heard from PortAventura earlier about becoming the world's first carbon neutral theme park, which was fascinating. We've heard of Blenheim Palace cutting plastic from their food wrappings and switching to renewable electricity. And I think these examples just prove that no matter your size or the type of attraction you run, we can all have a real impact together. And we've seen it ourselves with our customers. So dozens of attractions we work with are no longer printing paper maps. They've switched to be fully digital, and they're getting rid of plastic membership cards as well, from small farm parks to world-renowned zoos. All of these changes together are making a real impact. And with that said, I'd like to now bring in our special guests and start the discussion. So I think we'll cover off our first topic, which is technology's role in reducing waste. And I think I'll hand over to you, Jacob, to get that started.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, as you alluded to there, it's become really apparent in the industry that attractions can make big changes by reducing their use of paper and plastic. We know that when guests arrive on site at the moment, they're inundated with tickets, with maps, with park information, and that's before we even start to think about the on-site waste from food outlets, from retail outlets. So reducing this kind of waste, there's going to be some really quick wins for us there. And I think what's also really important before we dive in is to acknowledge that guests are more conscious than ever of the issues that we're talking about today. So one recent survey that we looked at had over 70% of respondents say that they wanted to adopt more sustainable behaviours and lifestyles this year. So obviously we've got the team at ZooTampa here today, and I just wanted to highlight that the first thing is that there's been a commitment from the team over at ZooTampa to reduce paper by up to 95%, which first off is absolutely amazing. I just wondered, guys, if you could tell us a little bit more about where that target came from and what you're doing to work towards it.
For sure. Thanks, Jacob and Mark. So as you guys have already mentioned, maps, tickets, things like that produce quite a bit of paper waste. And here at ZooTampa, just last year, we had 400,000 printed tickets, 30,000 printed membership cards, and 300,000 printed maps and show schedules. And, of course, that is not cheap to pay for financially, but also is a huge burden on the environment. So it was kind of a no-brainer to pick up technology to replace that. And so over time, in the next 2 years, we hope to reduce that paper waste by 90 to 95%, which will cut down on that paper waste tremendously, but also save us here at the zoo as a nonprofit. It will save us about $50,000 per year.
Yeah, I mean, that's an absolutely amazing figure. It is not only the sustainability element, but this is also those important funds, as you highlighted, I imagine, will be able to be spent more wisely across some of the other sustainability and conservation initiatives. And obviously, paper was one big area of the waste reduction. What other areas have you been working on as an organisation to help with sustainability?
So we've got several conservation initiatives. Of course, our mission is to protect and preserve wildlife, not only here in Florida, but across the world. And we have recently, in the past few years, eliminated our plastic straws and plastic lids on cups. We're now moving towards more recyclable aluminum cups in park to totally eliminate those plastic cups. And that will help tremendously as well. Sandra, did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about here?
No, I mean, we, as a conservation organization, our goal is to really demonstrate and teach the responsible use of natural resources. So we want to not only be able to talk about it, but in our own actions, make sure that we're following those usage, decreasing water usage, electric usage throughout the zoo, to really preserve our natural resources throughout the world.
And then we also focus on, a lot of the species that we have here are suffering from habitat loss. And that habitat loss is often because of mining, so they need to go into these areas and mine for materials that are actually used in a lot of our electronics these days, cell phones, computers, our laptops. And so that is a big key conservation effort that we have began focusing on, is recycling those electronics that people have, their old cell phones, to cut down on that e-waste. Just our most recent electronics recycling drive, we recycled 3,700 pounds of e-waste, and we'll be holding those recycling drives quarterly.
Yeah, that's brilliant, and I think it's really highlighting that there's so many areas to have an impact and obviously save on resources and reduce waste. It's not a small feat either. So you've done so much already. But have there been any big challenges for you as an organisation to get these initiatives up and running? And has there been any stumbling blocks along the way? What's been the hardest thing for you?
I don't know if there's been too much that's been difficult. It's just, a matter of time, a matter of us adopting these technologies to align with our conservation message, and then communicate that with our guests and our audience. And I think most of our audience, of course, is well aware of the role we play as far as our conservation and sustainability mission. And so they are more than happy and willing to adopt the technologies with us and go along with us in this conservation effort.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioning guests there. How has the reaction overall has been positive? I guess you mentioned that the use of shifting away from printed tickets, printed maps. What has the reception been there, and the general sentiment? Are people open to that kind of new technology and that change?
Yeah, the reception's been great so far. We launched our app through Attractions.io about a month and a half ago, and we've got over 11,000 users right now. So that's pretty remarkable in just a short period of time. So I think that right there is just a testament to how willing people are to adopt this and use it. And people are just used to that nowadays, right? Nobody wants to pick up a paper map and carry it around. And people are used to having an app for things that they visit often, whether it's a retail store or a theme park or a zoo or a sporting arena. The apps can handle pretty much anything guest related. So it's not just a matter of the map, but it also provides other features for the guest to use. It makes it more worthwhile to download and keep that app on their phone. And I think that they're seeing, guests wanted an app, I think, for a while, and they wanted to be able to access a map without having to, walk to a specific location in the zoo and find one. So it's nice to have that handy and get the wayfinding feature as well. Is very nice.
Yeah. It's also great that we're able to adjust it as we go along and keep everything up to date. So if we have a new baby animal born, or there's a new experience that it recently has come online, well, we don't have to throw away maps that are all of a sudden outdated, so that also saves us in money and in resources. And plus it keeps our content fresh, it keeps everything up to date. And we can also provide more information to guests who are seeking more information about the animal they're currently seeing. So we like the flexibility of it and how quickly we can turn things around.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that ties in very nicely into the next section that we're moving on to. It is obviously the big focus is making these changes, but also there's another element of actually communicating that, so guests are aware, and also that the team on your side are all bought in. One question, obviously we'll move on to a Q&A towards the end, but I think one question that's just come in that I think is just really relevant for this point is, you've achieved so much, you've set some massive targets, which is amazing. But one of the questions is looking at how can attractions looking to make these changes get started without feeling too overwhelmed, because quite naturally that there's a lot to take on and a lot to go after.
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously many ways that you can get involved with different technologies to reduce your waste, and I think it helps a lot to look at other zoos and attractions that have gone through this already, and then rely on a company like Attractions.io for a lot of the heavy lifting. If you're a small attraction, you don't have the finances to hire a team of developers and develop this app, but luckily there are solutions out there for you to lean on, and you can really take advantage of a lot of these with minimal work. It takes time, of course. It's not going to get up and running in a month or two, because there's a lot that goes into it, and there's planning, there's, you've got to figure out your message, and there's so much that goes into it. But it's really not, when you're relying on a partner like Attractions.io, they do so much of the heavy lifting for you that it's really not that big of it's not too overwhelming.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks for that, because I think obviously that there's going to be a lot of operators out there today listening and wanting to understand, how to get started in the best way. So that's I'm sure very useful. I think obviously we started to get onto the point of actually communicating these initiatives, and Sandra, you mentioned that the being able to keep content and information fresh and up to date. So I guess I'll just pass across to Mark, if that's okay, Mark, just to explore a bit further around the communication element.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting actually, you just saying about updating the map over the air so you don't have to reprint. And I know we have a lot of customers who will print different materials for different seasonal events, for example. So if there's Halloween, you might do a whole other run of printed collateral, which again is not necessary when you've got a device that in your pocket that can display this. And also another thing that made me think about was obviously with the COVID pandemic, I know there's been a lot of our customers where they've had memberships or season passes that they've obviously they have those memberships and season pass holders, and they've been extending the life of those passes, so they'll be extending the expiry dates essentially. And again, rather than having to reissue passes or because they all have the expiry date on the back, being able to do things electronically over the air obviously does also save a lot of waste. So that's certainly something that resonates with me and connects with other conversations I've had with different attractions. But yeah, I think just moving on to the kind of communicating, of course, you can implement these initiatives to reduce waste. I know that recycling and reducing waste is a big thing for you, but obviously it's equally as important to make sure that you can effectively communicate that change to guests. So what are you doing? What are you actually doing to communicate these sort of green initiatives?
So we've got, we communicate several ways with our audience, whether it's in-park signage, encouraging them to download the app, or encouraging them to recycle their electronics or buy sustainable palm oil, things like that. We communicate in park. We send, we use the app for content and for push notifications. We use our website. We have, our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Then we communicate through all of those with different messaging, depending on what the audience is. We can differentiate the messaging and promote different events, like the electronics recycling drive, for instance. We might send a push notification to everybody, letting them know, hey, this weekend, come by, drop off your old electronics and spend the day at the zoo at the same time.
Okay, and I had a really sort of a question about sort of your positioning with regards to conservation and sustainability, because I know, Sandra, you mentioned yourself earlier as a conservation organization, which of course you are. And one of the things I was interested in is sort of, obviously people know about your conservation efforts, but then how does sustainability actually sit alongside that? They're obviously intrinsically linked, but how do you clearly communicate what both of these ideas are to guests? I'd be interested to sort of know how you think about those two things sitting side by side.
Yeah, I mean, we realize that when people come to the zoo, they want connecting with animals and having fun, and they're not always necessarily going to be looking up tips and things like that. So when they're standing there in front of our orangutan habitat and they are seeing these animals, being beautiful and enjoying the beautiful weather out there with the animals, and they see a message that says you can help these animals in the wild by buying sustainable products when you go to the market. We encourage them, so at that moment they may not be on their phone exactly looking what is sustainable palm oil and what has it and what doesn't have it, but what we hope is that they've made a connection with this animal, so when they leave our zoo, they do go into the app, or they follow what some of those guidelines are once they leave. We have one of 4 major critical care centers here in Florida for manatees, and manatees face a lot of boat strikes, and they're and that's a consumer message. So we know when they're here, they're not on a boat and remembering boating tips, right? But they see a manatee, they connect with the manatee, so we hope then, and we tell them, we offer boating tips so that when they go on their boat the following day or the following weekend, they can refer back to some of those boating tips, like, oh, okay, let me, so we're trying to, so we know here we'll make the connection, and then we hope that then they leave our zoo and apply that to helping animals, to making the right choices when they're at the supermarket and they have 2 types of peanut butter to choose from, which one does not have palm oil, this one helps those orangutan. So that's our goal. We want to connect you here with the animals, we want to inspire you, and then we really hope that then when you go home, you make those changes that will help our environment and help wildlife that's in the world.
Sure. And I think what I wanted to also ask about was when you talked about the electronics and the impact that they have and the negative side of that on, the mining that happens and how that affects the wildlife habitats. I think that's really important to talk about, because obviously I'm pretty sure everyone by definition attending this conference is using a computer, that probably pretty much everyone's going to have a smartphone, and there is a negative side to this. And so that comes into the discussion. And I wondered if on this, because you mentioned, I think 3,700 pounds of electronic waste on the last drive that you did.
Right.
How do you orchestrate that? Like, what is a drive to you? Like, how do you run something like that when you're trying to get guests to actually act on something?
Yeah, so we reached out to our guests through our email campaign. We had some signage in the park. We did social media, but basically, we wanted for them to understand what the connection was between them recycling an electronic and how it would be helping an animal out in the wild. So, coltan is a mineral that's found in cell phones. And we have okapis here, a very beautiful, unique animal that looks like a mixture between a zebra and a giraffe. So at the okapi habitat here, we had a sign that said, isn't this a beautiful endangered animal? Guess how you can help it? Come out to our drive, recycle your cell phone, because the mineral that's found in your cell phone is mined where these animals live, and they're losing habitat. So we try to make that connection between how what they were doing and what they do in their regular life really does impact the animals that they're seeing and connecting and falling in love with.
Right. Hopefully, these messages resonate with our guests, and they're able to consciously make the decision to hold on to that cell phone for an extra year, or make sure to recycle their old electronics and don't just throw them in the trash, because these elements that are used in your electronics are difficult to access, and the process of mining is destroying habitats for many species all over the world, especially in Asian countries.
Absolutely, and I know that there is technology in this space as well being developed. In fact, I think Apple have a robot called Daisy that they launched a few years ago. That was the latest advanced robotics, but designed to take an iPhone, for example, and literally dismantle every little part and be able to sort of recycle and dispose of things appropriately. So, yeah, technology in every aspect, really. Just talking about some of the initiatives you've gone through so far. I mean, there's obviously so many good causes and things to align with around sustainability. We've touched on recycling. We've touched on the electronic waste. Can you give us some insight into how you actually decide on which of these things that you will align to as a zoo? What does that process look like? I'm really curious.
Yeah, well, so we have a green team on board. It's made up of individuals from all the different departments. We also have some rides here. So we have operations. We have obviously a big food service operation. We have the animal care and the animal medical side. So we have a team made up of representatives from all of those departments that we call the green team, and they come up with a lot of these initiatives as well with reasonable timelines to get it, because obviously we would love to be fully green tomorrow, but we also know we have to be realistic and take steps and come up with plans and come up with master plans, especially when it comes to water and electricity usage, things like that. So so that team kind of leads the charge. We're also part of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and they also have a lot of green initiatives around things like Earth Day, and Party for the Planet initiatives. There's a river that runs on the border of our zoo, so we also participate with river cleanups and things like that, because that's running literally like on our border. So we're always looking to do more, hoping we can do more, but we try to be realistic. And we do have a 5-year plan of where we plan to go and how to get there.
Yeah, and I think that probably underscores, right, the importance also of internal communication around making change, because if you're going to go and replace all of the single-use plastics or roll out digital maps or ticketing or whatever it may be, then that obviously, as you say, it crosses different departments, operations, and marketing, all different areas. So you need that buy-in to make it all come together. And it sounds like your green team help coordinate that.
Yeah, definitely. They help a lot.
Fantastic. So interested time, got my eye on the clock. So Jacob, I don't know if you want to sort of move on to the subject of what comes next.
Yeah, I think that ties very nicely. Obviously, Sandra, you mentioned the 5-year plan and beyond, and I think it's just important as we kind of close the discussions today before we move on to the Q&A is to look at the future relationship between obviously technology and sustainability and what part it plays, because things are moving so rapidly. I mean, we've mentioned it a couple of times. 20 years ago, we wouldn't have imagined that our smartphones would be as powerful as our computers, and it's just not something we even question today. So I guess for Steve and Sandra, as we're looking to the future, what does sustainability look like at ZooTampa, and how do you think technology is going to play a part in that?
Yeah, so we're obviously going to continue to try to stay on top of new technologies, and especially ones that align with our goals to be sustainable and conserve wildlife. And there are a few things that we're looking at potentially doing in the coming years. augmented reality is something that could be very interesting. It's engaging, and it would be excellent to get messaging across and help educate guests about conservation and education, sort of a way to bring the zoo out of the zoo to to guests in their homes. And that's a big part of the app as well, is it's not just to be used here at the zoo. People walking around the zoo aren't necessarily going to be staring at their phones or using the technologies that we use when they're here, but we want them to use these technologies everywhere, and allow these things to become to help them to become more sustainable with the things that they do in their everyday lives.
Brilliant. I think it's really exciting. We're really pleased to be working with the team at ZooTampa as well, and I think there's some exciting things on the horizon as we carry on working together. And I guess finally for you, Mark, obviously you saw the opportunities that technology could provide when the Apple App Store launched back in 2009, and the idea of empowering visitor attractions with technology. I guess taking a look at the bigger picture, what do you think the relationship between technology and sustainability is going forward?
Yeah, well, I think I wanted to just share a quote. I don't know if we can bring the slides back up on screen if they are or not, but this is just a quote actually from Elon Musk. This supersedes political parties, race, creed, religion. It doesn't matter. If we do not solve the environment, we're all damned. And I think for me, one of the most sobering things about what Elon is doing is that, yes, he's using technology to contribute electric cars with Tesla and solar panels and carbon capture, but he's also actually using technology to form a backup plan. He's been looking at multi-planetary life and colonizing Mars, and he's doing that because he thinks there's a good chance that we'll all destroy our own wonderful planet, to the point where it's uninhabitable, which as I say, I find that sort of very sobering, really. And so we need to act, of course, and it's not all doom and gloom. There are some exciting things on the horizon. I'll just reel through a few that I think are particularly poignant in relation to technology. So we've got electrical vehicles, of course. They're going to be huge, and it's not just cars, it's the trucks, it's the transport vehicles. The cost of battery technology has been rapidly falling, and that will help make it mainstream. Hydrogen energy is probably also going to play a part in transport, maybe for things like cargo ships. I think solar power is another big one. We've seen what Disney and others have been doing. We've seen how we can be self-sustaining. Again, I think it's getting cheaper, it's getting more efficient. Funnily enough, again, one of Elon's side projects has been to make the solar roof, as he calls it, which is basically tiles for your roof that happen to generate electricity, so they look good, and all homes can just be, built that way, or buildings can be built that way. So yeah, I think technology will make self-sustaining homes a possibility for the first time. It's certainly an enabler in that regard. And one of the big things, and I think we touched on it, but one of the big things we're going to be able to impact as attractions, I think Sandra did touch on this point, is championing the conscious consumer. So making sure that our guests can go on in their day-to-day lives aware of their actions, thinking about things like the food they eat and whether it's sustainably sourced. And on that topic, I think supply chains at the moment are pretty opaque when it comes to things like food supply. But blockchain is another technology used by cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, and that could have a role to play in ensuring that everything is transparent and consumers really are aware and know for sure where things are coming from and what impact it's having. Finally, I think we couldn't touch on technology and the impact on anything without talking about data and AI, and of course, that will play a role. I think Microsoft did a project where they estimated 2.4 gigatons of CO2 emissions could be eliminated simply by acting on certain levers you could pull that AI could detect. And that's the equivalent to an annual combined, emissions load of Australia, Canada, and Japan combined, just to give you an idea. And I wanted to leave you actually with some kind of food for thought around just technology in general, in terms of how it might help with sustainability. So, technology growth is exponential. And the way our minds think about things in the future is very much linear. So as you can see on this graph, exponential growth gets faster and faster over time. It's the orange line. Linear growth is kind of just taking what's gone before and steadily producing it into the future. And that's why, I mean, I think back in my lifetime, back to when mobile phones were starting to become recognizable in society back in the sort of late 90s, no one then would have foreseen that you'd have touchscreen devices with internet capabilities and everything that we have just within the next 10 years. And that was the kind of stuff you only saw in, you know, science fiction movies. But technology was growing exponentially, and you know, our ability to actually predict as a human race is very much linear. And I think that's an example of that. And you see the gap gets bigger and bigger. And this is happening now, especially with in many areas, actually. But, you know, if you think a good example is artificial intelligence, I think these things will kind of surprise us or kind of creep up on us, let's say. And whether we like it or not, technology, you know, it is going to play a key role in becoming sustainable in our modern world. And so whilst it's hard to predict exactly what things will look like in the future, I think we should make sure our eyes are open and embrace those technologies, again, much like Steve was touching on, so that we can use all the tools and technology available to tackle the challenges that we face together, because that is what this is all about, really. It's about coming together, because that's how we can make the big impact. And with that, I think we're going to open it up to Q&As. Charlie, I don't know if you're there to to share any that have come through.
I think you're on mute, Charlie.
There you go. I'm not on mute. So I'll rub my hands together again and say exactly what I was going to say. Thanks, guys. That was a really interesting discussion. We've got a whole load of questions coming in, so I'll start from the top. First one from Mark or Jacob. I'm not a zoo. What have you seen work well with other industries?
Yeah, I think, you know, to be honest, a lot of these are universal, certainly for the attractions industry. So, you know, a lot of the ways we've looked about eliminating waste. So, you know, we talked about maps, we talked about ticketing, we've talked about removing, you know, single-use plastics and cutlery. I think whatever type of attraction or venue that you operate, a lot of those things can sort of still apply universally. So, yeah, I think what we talked about today isn't exclusive to zoos. Obviously, zoos have this focus on conservation, and that links in really well with sustainability. And yeah, it's been interesting to hear about how you know, the plan is to inspire guests, right, and then make that connection, which I think is really powerful. But I would say that, yeah, everything we've discussed is really transferable. I don't know if you'd have anything to add there, Jacob.
No, yeah, just echo exactly what Mark said there. I think we've all got our part to play in this, and that's the most important thing. And we've all got to inspire our guests, and also it's an expectation of guests now, as we mentioned before, that we have to be more sustainable as attractions. So yeah, exactly what Mark said. I think what we've spoken about is completely universal. Okay, cool.
Next question is for Sandra and Steve, and we've had this question with regards to both technology and sustainability. How can an attraction looking to make changes get things started without feeling overwhelmed? I can imagine it feels a bit daunting when you've not started on this kind of journey. So with regard to apps, for example, how would you start?
Yeah, I think we touched on this a bit earlier, and it's just you don't set expectations too high for yourself. Set realistic goals and reach out to others who have already been there and done that, and lean on their experience. And then hopefully you can find a company like Attractions.io or whether it's some other technology, not an app, if it's your for text message marketing, or if it's for AI, find a vendor that has expertise in the field and can guide you along the way. And you don't have to be too overwhelmed with it yourself, because they can kind of hold your hand and guide you through the whole process.
Good stuff. An equally practical question. How disability friendly is the app? And you have introduced a set of printed maps.
Yeah, that's a great question. A great question. Yeah, so I was just going to say that I think one of the nice things about technology actually is that it can be more disability friendly in terms of, the paper map. It doesn't have braille. It's not very accessible for people who have got sort of partially sighted or have issues otherwise being able to consume it. So I think where technology again can come in is by using technologies such as voiceover, where it can actually read out all the different species of animal, for example, and can kind of talk to you about them using audio, for example, and also high contrast mode. So technology, all both Android and iOS devices, you can very easily within the settings switch onto high contrast mode or in large font sizes. Of course, it's totally dynamic, and that's something you just don't get with your standard paper map. And of course, you may produce separate materials that are more accessible, but again, that's using paper, etc. So that's what I'd say on it.
Okay, cool. And another for Sandra and Steve. Are you cooperating with any other zoos or animal-based attractions to share the digital development you've achieved?
Do you have an answer?
Yeah.
We haven't yet, but we're always willing to work with anybody who reaches out. We're one big community in the zoological world, so we're always happy to help any other zoo that might want some advice.
Okay, cool. And a question, I think, for Mark and Jacob. How have Bluetooth beacons played a role in the digitalization of the themed attractions industry?
Yeah, do you want me to take that one, Mark?
Go for it, Jacob.
Yeah. So we actually offer kind of Bluetooth beacons as part of the mobile app solution as a whole. I think it's really powerful, whether that be from a personalization point of view, is engaging people as they arrive based on the location. But I think especially kind of poignant for zoos is that if you've got guests that are passing by, say, the tiger enclosure, is you can alert them to a talk time, a keeper talk time that's taking place soon, so you can engage the guests around there. And also, again, for pushing conservation initiatives. So if you want to educate people as they go around in a fun and friendly way about the conservation activities for each animal, then that's another way that you can push that content and really engage with people based on their location. So I think absolutely there's so many applications for it in terms of whether that be location-based messaging or targeting based on different demographics. It's really important when we're educating and inspiring people and providing that amazing experience, it is that it is as personalized as possible. So I think it's a massive piece of the puzzle, and there's so many other elements to that communication piece.
Yeah, I think it builds really on what Sandra was talking about in terms of, within the zoo setting, being able to inspire and then make that connection to, sustainability and conservation. Beacons give you the opportunity to do that because you can do it en masse and you can do it sort of very easily and connect with all your guests on site. So, it's definitely helps with the experience.
Another question, this is for everyone. What do you foresee the role of technology and apps specifically in terms of supporting sustainability going forward? So it's easy to see, for example, how an app would replace a paper map or paper tickets, but how else might that help in sustainability going forward?
I've got a thought on this. I mean, it's kind of in all areas, isn't it? Because I think our apps, our smartphones, if you like, they're kind of an extension of ourselves. They allow us to be greater than we are able to be, if you like, do more than we would be able to do. So, I'm thinking about some of the things we touched on the end there about the future and, for example, electric vehicles. So again, the roadmap for Tesla is to actually have a network of electric vehicles where you can just no one actually owns a vehicle, and using an app you would call the vehicle to just self-drive to you, and of course it's all electric. So things like that, I think generally across society are going to obviously have big impacts on having green transport and not needing to own these big metal devices that churn out terrible things into the environment. So I think wherever you turn, it's kind of the app is the interface. I think the app is the interface. And we think about, in the attraction setting, we often think about it in terms of being the guest interface, because it's the connection between your brand and the guest that's with them all the way through the experience, including while they're on site. And I think that applies to all brands. You know, if it is Tesla, then the kind of an app will play a central part to being able to call that over. I also think there's probably big things happening in countries like Africa, where, you know, Starlink, again, everything seems to be tying back to Elon Musk today, but with the Starlink satellites providing internet access, and smartphones are like supercomputers of not that long ago. So I think just as a communication device, as a tool for research, as a tool for change, even social networks, like, they have the power to massively influence people. You know, if anyone hasn't seen some of the documentaries, I forgot what it's called now, on social media, but, like, you know, the power that's in your pocket is quite phenomenal. And I think there's so many different ways in which you know, apps and mobile technology specifically will assist. And it's almost like, you know, every part of whatever you could imagine, that it'll have a part to play, I think.
Okay. One objection I've heard a lot, generally from people who don't have a lot of tech in their attractions, or who are not using apps, is that they want the visitors to engage with the attraction, let's say with the animals or the exhibits, and not with technology while they're on site. How would you respond to that comment?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I think, you know, for us, it's funny because people think traditionally in engagement, when you're looking at digital channels like your website, you really want people, right, to spend as long with you as possible, like having a long session time or whatever is great. When we're actually looking at the apps that we have out in attractions, we're trying to minimize the interaction. I mean, I think it's a mindset thing. It's like, you know, the app is there to facilitate a better experience and to educate and enrich the experience. It's not there to replace the experience. So, you know, if people are at parks and they are walking around just glued to the phone, in our view, that is a bad thing, because, as you say, you know, people go to attractions to connect with friends and family, have a fantastic time, to connect with wildlife at these wonderful places like ZooTampa. So I think, you know, that's a valid concern, but I think it's just, I look at it through a different lens, which is that, you know, our mission is to enhance, not to take away. And also, I think it's important as an industry that, you know, we must embrace technology. And I think those that don't, you know, will ultimately be left behind, because, you know, if you're an attraction now, you are competing with Netflix for their streaming content. You're competing with Microsoft and Sony for their games consoles. You know, there's this digital world we are in, where you're basically wanting people to come and spend time with you. You're competing against these digital things. So I think embracing technology to make sure that they are personalized and they are on demand and they are, you know, as good as they can be and enhanced, is really what we should not be afraid of, but we should embrace. And I think the same applies to a lot of the technologies that'll be around in relation to improving sustainability, some of which we've touched on obviously today.
Okay. A question from Judy. She says, one of the benefits of technology is a link with the guests after the visit. This can provide reminders and can measure impact after the visit. Has any of you done this effectively, and can you give examples? Are you doing that at ZooTampa, for example?
Yeah, we're using the app for push notifications. You know, we also communicate with people via our email blasts and text messages, and it's, you know, really a wide array of communication methods that we use to keep in touch with our guests when they're not here. One of the great things about the app is that you're able to send different communications to people that are in park versus not in park. So I think that's one way that we've managed to do that effectively and differentiate our messaging.
Yeah, I was also going to add a little bit to what Mark was saying about using technology to enhance the guest experience instead of taking it away. Because one of the things we're able to do with the app is have like a scavenger hunt around the zoo. You know, we have a lot of members and a lot of families that have repeat visits to the zoo, so we can make it different every time they come. And a small child can use the app to engage in a game. We had a baby orangutan born, and we had 2 QR codes, and that's how you voted for the baby's name. So we can use the technology to enhance the visit versus taking it away.
Okay, cool. I think that's all of our questions for now. That's been a fantastic session. Is there anything any of you would like to add?
Nothing from me.
Yeah.
I would just like to say, sorry, I'd just like to thank you, Charlie and Rachel, also for putting this on, because I'm sure this will be reiterated a few times throughout the event, but obviously it's collective effort on this subject, and I think it's great that you've managed to bring us all together to talk about it over these couple of days.
Yeah, cool, and we really appreciate your help too, Mark. And it's good to have you involved. And so our next session is at 4. There's an opportunity to find out what Disney's doing, and between then and now, please do network. Go into the booths and have a look around there. There's tons of people watching this session, so feel free to network with them. And we do have another speed dating session tomorrow as well, so keep an eye on that. So thanks very much, everyone, and I'll see you all again.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone.